Our ever-increasing fleets of fortresses and liberators pressed onto their targets and dropped their loads. And the day arrived when a huge 8th Air Force bomber mission with full fighter escort was flown to Berlin and back without a challenge by a single enemy fighter. But before that eventful day, the Thunderbolts, Lightnings, and Mustangs had another mission to perform. Our bomber and fighter losses were strikingly less than the enemy's. But the home front sent us more bombers and fighters and more well-trained pilots, and our fleets grew mightier by the month. However, the enemy's first-line operational strength was maintained also. The great air battle of Europe was still undecided. In February 1944, there was a sudden change. Our fighters were ordered to range wider, to seek the enemy in the air and on the ground instead of waiting for him, and above all, to follow him to his destruction. A gigantic fighter battle raged across the European skies with victories by our fighters alone of 60, 85, over 100 destroyed each day. The fight came down from almost invisible heights to the final decision, perhaps only a few feet above the ground. Enemy warplanes of every kind and in fantastic numbers were splashed all over the landscape of northwestern Germany and occupied Holland, Belgium, France. This was a crucial battle. Both sides were aware of the coming events with air domination itself at stake. Once again, a better cause, better planning and leadership, better equipment, and beyond everything else, the valor of our fighter pilots gave us victory. Only this time, it was decisive. So many of the enemy's aircraft exploded over his own forest and housetops, or were driven flaming wrecks into the ground. So many of his famous fighter leaders met death at the hands of our pilots that his morale was shattered. His defense plan was smashed. Quickly, our fighters seized their opportunity. Since the enemy did not come up to fight, down they went to blast his planes to pieces and burn them on his own aerodromes all over Western Europe and in the very heart of Germany. It was the most savage and devastating fighter attack on record. Returning from unchallenged escort duty and on many special missions, they burned his aircraft by hundreds from one airfield to another. Intense enemy flak, sheets of machine gun fire from flak towers and ground installations caused us heavy losses. 4 times as many as the same number of fighters would sustain in aerial combat. But our fighters never flinched, and by their courage, faced destruction in single-engine planes only a few feet above the ground, and 500 miles from their bases, until they had smashed the heavily concentrated front-line operational strength of the German Air Force forever. Now that the sky was ours, another great opportunity became ours too. The destruction of the enemy's transportation system that fed and supplied the great armies counted on to repel the Allied invasion forces. The enemy's roads and railroads were struck with the mighty force of air power. These were tense days, crucial days, and both sides knew it. Our fighters, freed by their bitterly won victory in the air, became a dominant factor on the ground. They exploded locomotives by the thousands and burned freight cars in uncounted numbers. No train in daylight hours was safe. No target too small, even a single railroad car. No marshaling yard a haven. The enemy's desperately needed rail transport system was shattered all over the map. His barges. His oil tanks. Flak towers. Radio and radar stations. Trucks carrying ammunition and supplies. Staff cars carrying high German officials. This one might have been Rommel. Road traffic of every kind and description until enemy convoys could only move effectively at night. What did this mean to the German armies of the West? How did it count on Invasion Day in the Battle of Normandy? The answer is history. Our gallant armies are driving ahead without having to keep one eye cocked over their shoulders. Their gun emplacements unobserved. Everywhere about the mighty battle was and is the flash of American fighters. The Germans see them deep in their own sky and cringe. Our men see them above the grim fight and cheer. There are remembered names in the mess halls. Major Gerald Johnson, a crack shot. Major Goodson, gallant fighter. Major Dwayne Beeson, great tactician. Captain Eugene O'Neill, one of the best. Major Don Gentile ran up a flaming record. Colonel Don Blakesley, great leader of 4th Group. Major Walker Mahurin, one of the first and best of the great aces. Major Bob Johnson and all his victories. Lieutenant Colonel Gabreski with a great career. And Colonel Hubert Zemke, famous commander of 56. A score of victories or more on the records of them all. Duncan, Schilling, Pretty, and all our gallant fighter pilots who in the decisive hour smashed the Luftwaffe and gave us freedom of the air in Europe, just as that freedom must now be gained in the Pacific.